Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey guys, and welcome back to another super awesome episode of the Mentor Nation podcast. I'm your host, John Abbas, and today's episode is absolutely 100% going to inspire you and definitely add some value to your week. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing the amazing Elaine Pofeldt. Elaine is an author, blogger, and a journalist who specializes in entrepreneurship. She has written countless articles for Forbes magazine, Fortune, Money, CNBC, and Crain's, just to name a few. And she recently wrote an incredible book that is the topic of our talk today called The $1 Million One-Person Business. The title of her book was so attractive that I just had to reach out to Elaine to speak about her research of talking and interviewing with dozens and dozens of people around the world running seven-figure businesses, and get this, with no employees. In today's episode, we dive into some of the statistics and trends of people relying on technology, tools, and virtual assistants to build and scale their businesses to at least $1 million a year before having to deal with the headache of hiring, managing, and firing employees. We also talk about which businesses and industries are seeing the most growth with this type of a business, as well as some of the things that you can do to get on that track if you aren't already. I mean, think about it. Who would not want to make $1 million a year without having an employee? You know, me personally, I own a daycare and it does over $1 million a year, but I have 33 people that I have to pay every 2 weeks on top of the responsibility and the liability that goes along with that. And so you can imagine how excited I was to have this interview and to share it with you guys. I hope you enjoy this episode. And without further ado, here's Elaine. All right, Elaine, thank you so much for being on Mentor Nation. Glad to have you.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here, John.
Awesome. So to kick off the call or just the interview, I wanted to ask you just a question as an icebreaker. If you could just, take a minute and tell us about maybe a really cool experience that you've had recently, or maybe somebody that you've met recently that was just really cool or inspiring.
One of the things that I always enjoy doing, it's not a new experience for me, but every week I go to Taekwondo with my daughters and we do martial arts together. That's what I did yesterday morning. I find it's really great for focusing in terms of, just keeping your mind on one thing. And that's really helpful for me with my business.
Wow. So you take the class too?
I do. Yeah. My daughters and I are all black belts. We've been doing it for about 8 years, and it's a lot of fun. It was one of these classes where they have families in it. So mostly it was like dads and teen boys, but there was one woman in it at the time who was doing it with her son. And I thought she was about my age and she's doing it. So I thought, okay, let me try this. And then we got hooked, and it's become something we really enjoy doing.
That's amazing. I competed in Taekwondo for years until I was about...
Really?
Yes, ma'am. I was a black belt and I won nationals, and my dream at one point was to actually go to the Olympics, but where I lived in Nashville, there was not a coach that could really just take me there. And so I would have had to have moved to Indiana, and it just wasn't possible for me to do at that time. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner. So that's really cool to hear that you've done that. That's amazing.
It's very addictive, isn't it? Let me see, you understand it. One of my friends in the class said it's like a cult, but it really isn't. There's just something about it. I also do a lot of yoga, and it's the same type of thing where it's kind of a practice.
Right.
So you're constantly working on different aspects of it, whether it's the forms or the sparring, and it really gets you hooked.
Absolutely. That's one thing that I did not know about you. So, well, Elaine, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. And I know the audience is going to be blown away by this interview. And I really am pumped to just take a deep dive into your book today. And you wrote The $1,000,000 One Person Business. Make great money, work the way you like, have the life that you want. And I'm excited because I think that is probably one of the catchiest titles that I have ever heard. I mean, if I was at an airport and I was going to my flight and I walked by and I saw that book, I would probably have to stop and pick that up. So I think that's a fantastic title, first of all.
Oh, well, thank you, John. That happened by accident, actually. The whole topic for the book came to me by accident. I've been a journalist covering entrepreneurship for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think in about 2012 or 2013, I write 5 blogs a month for Forbes. And I was looking for idea number 5. And I'm sort of Googling around for, a new study I could write about or something like that. And I found the Census Bureau statistics for the non-employer business. And for those that haven't heard that term, it's basically government jargon for businesses that don't run payroll. They have mm-hmm. the owners work there, but they don't have any other people on, getting a paycheck. And I noticed in the statistics that there were people breaking 1 million in revenue in these businesses. And I thought, wait a minute, I know a lot of freelancers, designers, people in these one-person shops. They're not making $1 million in revenue a year. Right. So I started slicing and dicing the data, and I noticed they were across many different industries: manufacturing, retail, professional services, personal services like being a fitness trainer or nutritionist, et cetera. And I wrote this blog post. I looked back at it recently, mm-hmm. and it really was just about the statistics, and it went viral. I was really surprised because I look at it now and I'm like, it's not very colorful, but I didn't know who the businesses were because the Census Bureau, they can't tell you that, right? Those surveys are confidential. So then about a year later, I couldn't find out who they were. So I wrote to the readers of Forbes and I said, if you're one of these businesses, people are very curious about what you're doing, please write to me. So I found 5 of them. And then I wrote a post about those businesses, and that went even more viral. So I could kind of see people were very interested in it. And in that post, there was one guy who ran an online spy camera store. Another woman ran a babysitting service with a whole bunch of babysitters that were contractors. There was somebody who was he was a financial planner who had a newsletter, a big ticket newsletter that he wrote. And then there was a fitness trainer injured while training. He was a decathlete in Canada, and he developed a methodology that he was then training other fitness trainers to use, and they could license his brand name. And so every time I found somebody like this, I would profile them, and then it kind of built a following, and then that is what led to the book.
Wow, that's incredible. It really hit me because, one of my main businesses is a daycare center. And so, it...
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And as a business, it does, over $1 million a year, but, 33 employees, tons of moving parts. And so when I listened to your podcast on Hal Elrod's show, I was just blown away. And so I wanted to see if we could take just a little bit of a step back and you could just share a little bit about you and how you got into writing. And then we're going to get right into the book, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm one of those people that always knew they wanted to be a writer. I realize I'm kind of lucky in that I'm kind of a Johnny or Jane OneNote, right? So even when I was like in kindergarten, I wanted to be a writer. And I was I was the editor of my school newspaper in high school. And then I went to Yale. I was the arts and entertainment editor. Sorry, I just got startled for a second, of the Yale Daily News. And I just continued that interest when I was an adult. I was a reporter at a couple of newspapers in New Jersey. Then I became a fashion features editor at Women's Wear Daily. I kind of needed a break from, knocking on doors after there's been a crime or that sort of thing. And I wanted to do something light and fun. And I found I enjoyed the business side of the fashion industry a lot. And then that led to a job at Success Magazine, where I was a senior editor. And then at one point, the acting editor. Then I moved over to the Fortune Group at Time Inc. And I ran Fortune Small Business Online. And I wound up moving over to the magazine for a while, then back online. And then I went freelance in 2007. And I've run my freelance business ever since.
Wow. That's a really, really fascinating story. And so you are obviously interviewing a lot of these entrepreneurs. You start seeing these trends, and then does that lead to the inspiration to write your book, The $1,000,000 One Person Business, after you see one after one after one after this blog post?
Well, definitely. Actually, an agent approached me because she noticed those posts were doing really well. And I found that, I've written probably thousands of stories at this point, and some of them have had a big response, but never the magnitude of the response to this. And then when I thought about it, there are 28 million small businesses in the United States. And I just looked this up. 81% of them are non-employer businesses, right? So this is the vast majority of small businesses, but they don't really get any coverage. And even now,
Right.
Sometimes it's hard for me to pitch stories about them to some of the major business publications because they only care about what is scalable. And those scalable businesses are important, right? Like we all want to know what is the next Facebook. That is important for the business landscape. But I think what's ignored is these one-person businesses because they're not job creators. And the way I look at it is they are job creators for the owner, right? If you have 28 million people who created their own job, why is that any different than a smaller number of companies creating 28 million jobs? Everybody's got a different perspective on it, but I felt like it was an untapped area and people had a tremendous passion for it. And they were choosing it for lifestyle reasons too. There are people that just don't want the responsibility of hiring employees yet, or maybe at all. Sometimes their business isn't big enough where they can really manage payroll, but I think they still need information about how to build their revenue. And maybe someday they will reach that size, which is what I'm finding. I'm actually updating the book. It's coming out in paperback in March. And I found that some of them chose to deliberately stay small and have a boutique size business. And others have decided, you know what, I'm doing really great with this. Let's keep going and see where I can take it.
Absolutely.
And scaling the traditional way. But what they know is how to do it in a very lean way because they've basically been bootstrappers. And that's a little bit different than the Silicon Valley venture capital model where they give you a ton of money and then you have to spend it. It's a whole different mindset of running a business. And I think you can learn so much from these businesses.
Yeah. And I think everybody, myself included, just given the opportunity to run and build a business up to $1 million without ever having to hire an employee, it's a dream. And, you're interviewing these types of entrepreneurs daily. So what, is there an industry that you see more and more people are gravitating to when it comes to these types of businesses, or is it just all across the spectrum?
Well, John, there are some major groups. So I would say professional services is one, and there's different reasons. So I'll get into that a little bit. With professional services, where you see it is with people who either can charge a very high hourly rate, they're just highly skilled. So maybe you're a crackerjack computer programmer or an attorney or someone like that, who has skills that not everybody has. They are creating an informational product out of their knowledge. So I had one person I profiled for Forbes. Brian Dean was a copywriter and he built up a lot of knowledge of SEO. And so he created a course out of that, which then became his $1 million one-man business. So he wasn't necessarily working hourly anymore. He turned his knowledge into a product. You'll see that with personal services too. So one person in the book, Megan Telpner, is a nutritionist. She was seeing clients in the clinic initially, but then she decided she wanted to scale how she could reach people. So she created a small PDF file called the 3-Day Green Smoothie Fast, and she sold it for $10 to her email list. And then that led to developing courses, which then led her to create the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, a school where she had multiple courses. This happened over 11 years. It wasn't an overnight type of thing, but that became her $1 million one-woman business. And now she's at the point where she's actually hired some people. So she's beyond that stage. You'll see with manufacturing, this is a really interesting development, right? Who would think that a one-person business could be a manufacturer? But what you're seeing is like with food businesses, you can come up with a recipe in your kitchen, but you can't legally make it in your kitchen if you're going to sell it in Walmart or somewhere like that for health reasons, right? So you'd have to hire a co-packer. You pay them a certain amount for them to pack it up and, make it for you in a sanitary way so that it can then be sold at scale. One interesting business that I profiled for Forbes, it was called Booby Bars. And the founder of it wound up, she was a nurse who worked with new moms, and she had a nursing support group, and she was making nutrition bars for the moms. And they started wanting so many that they would buy them from her. And then she's like, oh, this is a good business idea. And then she turned it into a product using a co-packer, and now it's in Walmart. So that, and she's a nurse with no business experience whatsoever. She just learned the ropes. There's a lot of great resources for this now. So you could go on Makers Row, which is a website for manufacturers. There's Alibaba, and a lot of resources are in reach now. There are some other areas, real estate, right? One of the big areas is property management and leasing. And one fellow in the book, Corey Binsfield, started out, he bought one property in Duluth, Minnesota, a duplex. And then he, as he brought in revenue from that, he kept investing. And now he has over 100 of these small properties all in this market that he is from, that he knows really well. And that's his business. He's also a financial planner, but the $1 million one-person business was real estate business. So they're really all over the map. A lot of it is mindset in terms of how you run the business. So I think that the owners, what they all have in common is they're very efficient, and they figured out how to extend what one person can do beyond the norm so that they can achieve high revenue and profits. And I'll stop there in case you have any questions, but I can get into how they do that.
Yeah, well, that was my first question, was just the mindset, because it seems like a lot of these stories that you're talking about, they didn't really have the goal of turning this into $1 million one-person business. It really it kind of happened, but the mindset that they had in common was just how to outsource. And that's what I wanted to get into now is, when it comes to outsourcing, what are, obviously people, virtual assistants, technology, what are you seeing people are using to outsource? And I'm sure it's all across the board, but what's kind of the mindset for being able to outsource some of these things?
I think you're keying in on something very important, John. These folks are not trying to do everything themselves. Mm-hmm. They're looking at their business from a distance and saying, okay, what do I have to do as the owner? What can I do better than anybody else? And what are those other things that I can offload? And then how can I offload them, which is very industry specific, right? In terms of like, if you're an e-commerce business, maybe, an obvious one would be fulfilled by Amazon, right? We all get these packages from Amazon that say fulfilled by Amazon. That means that the entrepreneur is paying Amazon a certain amount of money to handle the warehousing and packaging and that sort of thing. Many people find that is a really valuable thing to do, because otherwise, where are you putting all that stuff, right? In your house? I've heard a few stories of people who learn this the hard way. They have a truck pull up and put a pallet of stuff on their driveway, which the neighbors don't really like. And they realize, I have to get a warehouse, but a warehouse is really expensive. And then they start looking into options like that, or drop shipping. In other types of businesses, if you're doing professional services, let's say you're an accountant and you decide, I don't want to work for this big accounting firm anymore, I'm going to go out and start my own firm, then the things that you outsource would be different. Maybe you need a website. Should you, as the accountant, be designing the website? Well, a lot of people will hang on to every single thing in the business. They'll say, yeah, I could learn that, and then 3 weeks later, they're still learning web design. Meanwhile, they're not doing any accounting. So you want to look at things that there's a learning curve where maybe you pay somebody $500 or $1,000 to put up the website so you can be out marketing yourself, getting clients, that sort of thing. I would say for pretty much any business, there's certain things you can automate, which isn't outsourcing, but it's something else these folks do a lot of. So for instance, scheduling, I think did you use Calendly or Schedule Once? I know a lot of—
Yes, ma'am. Calendly.
Calendly, right. So that's something where for someone like me, I schedule a lot of appointments. I could save 3 hours pretty much every week by using that, right? And I always suggest that people try to get back 1 day a week in terms of time. Like, can you get back 7 hours a week through automation? Almost any business can, if you start thinking about the really mundane things in your job that you don't have to do. Is it different? Maybe there's a little bit more warmth when you're emailing back and forth to set up an appointment by email rather than using Calendly. But at this, I always feel like using these tools then allows you more time when you're on the phone with someone to have a real conversation as opposed to being rushed. So you want to think of it that way, that there isn't that much gained when they work with a real human on something very mundane, but there is a lot gained on the higher level aspects of the business. So those are some of the ways that people do it. The other thing is using contractors. So not everybody's going to use an outsourced service like Fulfilled by Amazon, but maybe you need contractors for certain things. It could be proofreading. It could be creating a PowerPoint that you need for a sales call. And there are a lot of big platforms. A lot of us are familiar with Upwork. There's People Per Hour. There's Freelancer. And there's just networking too. There's also some smaller ones that I've heard very good reviews on, like hiremymom.com. And a lot of these folks have their favorite ones, and it changes all the time because, the vibe on different platforms changes constantly. But they are willing to use freelancers so that they can focus on strategy and the big picture. The other thing I would say is a lot of them seem to prioritize wellness and things like meditation, creating some space in their life where they're not working on the business so that they can come back to it fresh. And that is not natural for entrepreneurs, right? Anybody who has their own business, it's like I work 7 days a week sometimes. You can't help it. Things come up, you're on deadline. But I find that the stronger the business is, the more likely they are to prioritize this.
Right.
Another thing I found is that they surround themselves with community. A lot of times they're working alone in their business, but they do selectively go to curated events where they'll be around other entrepreneurs that can help them learn. Actually, one of the entrepreneurs in the book, Jason Gaignard, runs something called Mastermind Talks. That's an example of a curated event. It's an application-only event. They meet once a year, and that's his whole business, his $1 million one-person business. And then they get together and exchange ideas, and they have great speakers. Some of them meet online. A lot of them are members of mastermind groups, which I used to think were a scam, but now I've heard about them. So many good things. And I feel like actually that's like, if you're not paying attention to that, you might be missing out on something. And then a lot of them have coaches also that push them out of that zone where I think a lot of businesses can get to maybe 250,000 to 400,000 or 500,000 with the owner just going bananas working.
Right.
But they get stuck there and they don't get past that. And what a coach will do for them is say, you got to start doing things differently and help them get out of it. And usually it's getting off the treadmill and trusting other people to help them. And sometimes at that stage, they will go to the point of hiring employees, sometimes for legal reasons, right? If you're hiring hourly people, you can't make them into contractors. Other times they're like, you know what? I just need to bring in different contractors to do different things in the business. Like maybe I need a social media agency. I shouldn't be doing every tweet. Or I need a PR firm, but that's not an employee. That's a contract that you'd have with them as a vendor. It's multiple things, but it's basically looking at not doing everything themselves.
Absolutely. Now, I do have a question. So I know, and I'm not sure if your book talks about this. I ordered it, but I haven't read all of it yet. And I know one of the biggest questions that the audience is going to have is, it's usually step one, right? Like, how do I find what I'm going to build my $1 million business out of? What is it that, I think for a lot of people, it might be, do I have anything that's valuable enough? Or do I need to find an idea? Or do I need to figure out or discover what I'm great at? Like, do you have a process for that? Or is there any advice that you can give someone that would love to do it, but they just don't know what they should do it in or where step one is?
That's a really great question, John. A lot of people ask that question, and there isn't a cookie cutter way to do it. I wish that there were, but what I have found in general with these businesses, it's an attitude of doing small experiments. And one of the most profound things that anyone said to me when I was researching the book, it was Ben and Camille Arneberg are a married couple who have started $3 million non-employer businesses. One was an e-commerce store called Willow and Everett that sold like decorative party wear, like wine glasses and that sort of thing. One was a kick-started business called CubeFit that sold mats for people who use stand-up desks to make them shift their weight, because their business partner on that one, he had gotten a blood clot while using a stand-up desk. And now the new one is Pet Honesty, which sells healthy dog treats. And I first met them by phone when they had done the first business, Willow and Everett, and they got to 1 million in about a year. And they wrote to me when they made that mark, and they said they took $5,000 from their savings. He had been in the military and she was working corporate social sustainability. They saved up their money and they took $5,000 and they said, we would pay $5,000 if we were in college and we had to pay for a college course. So we're going to look at our e-commerce store as a college course. So even if every single product we pick fails, we'll at least have learned a lot about e-commerce. And I think taking that attitude of experimenting and taking a small risk. Now, for some people, $5,000 would be a huge risk, right? If you don't have $5,000, maybe that's too much to bet. But they were in their 20s. They didn't have dependents. They were able to save up. I think that attitude is what will get you to your $1 million business, because no one really knows, right? These folks are a needle in a haystack. There's about 37,000 of them out of 28 million small businesses. All the other businesses are under 1 million. But what I have seen is that they'll test and test and test. And then when they see what works, they amplify it. And another example would be Laszlo Nadler, who is in the opening chapter of the book. He was a project manager, loves time management, and he created a business called Tools for Wisdom that creates paper planners, like a day book where you write down how do you move towards your life's biggest goal as opposed to what is on my to-do list. So he was a father. He had 2 children. His wife was staying home with the small kids. And so he had to keep his income going. And he started this on the side on Amazon. The first year, I think he told me he made either $12,000 or $14,000. And he got a lot of feedback from the people who bought it. He kept listening to the feedback. He would get on the phone with the people who posted comments and keep on improving the planners. And he did this over a period of several years, working on it at night and on the weekends. And finally, he got to a 6-figure revenue level where he felt like he was comfortable leaving his job and he could devote himself 100% to the business. And then he could do even more experimenting. But it was that attitude of like, let me put it out there, right? Don't wait for perfection. Put it out there. Iterate, get feedback. He could have waited till the perfect day when he could quit his job, and just start it then, but he would have not started with the same amount of information. And I think it's that attitude. One thing I've noticed, John, is that many of us have had the experience of working in traditional jobs.
That's right.
And in a company, who risks the money when you're trying to launch a new product? It's the company, right? Who spends the money if you need professional training? A lot of times it's the company, right? Like you all have to go sit in the conference room and learn this new technology. When you have your own business, you have to invest in yourself. And that's a mindset shift for people. They're like, oh, I don't want to waste my money. I don't want to spend it on what might not work. But that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. So it's figuring out how do you create that money so that you can invest in a business. And it's not a lot of money in many cases. Sometimes it's not even your own money. Like if you kickstart a product, right? If you can create a prototype with a small amount of your own money, then you get pre-orders from customers. But there is an element of risk to it, and it's getting comfortable with that. And I find a lot of these folks have had a job before, so it's kind of dipping a toe in the water of the world of risk.
Right.
And then building your capacity for risk. It's not taking crazy risks. A lot of them say, all I try to do is mitigate risk. But by doing that, they build a very strong business.
Man, that's so true. And, I don't know what your take is on this, but I see it everywhere. It seems like, although there's only 37,000 out of 28 million that are doing over 1 million without any employees, it seems like that trend is really growing. Like, is that what you're seeing?
It is. Yeah, it's been growing, like it's been growing rapidly. That's what I've been tracking in Forbes, and every year it keeps growing. You're absolutely right.
Because it's just like all of these new skills are in demand right now. Everything from copywriting or Instagram marketing, Facebook marketing, and it's just somebody making the decision to learn that one thing, and then they become valuable in the marketplace. And then from there, it's just taking the principles in your book, understanding the mindset of outsourcing and then implementing a lot of the strategies. And I feel like that anybody has the ability to do it if they can just focus and have the right mindset and stick with it and stay consistent.
You're so right, John. And that word consistent is really important, because sometimes people will read these stories and say, oh, this looks so simple, and it's like, yeah, it might be simple on paper, but you have to actually do it. That's that's not simple, right? Is every day showing up for the business. It's not saying, oh, I'll work on it today, and then 6 months later coming back to it for 3 hours, getting all enthusiastic, then putting it on a shelf. They're not doing that. They, we were talking about martial arts, right? That's one of the things that you learn is showing up, right? Like
That's right.
You go to class when you're tired, when you had a hard day at work, sometimes you're feeling really great. It's showing up all the time, consistently, no matter what, that makes these folks different. I found that they are, without being overly nutso about it, they are very disciplined. And I think that's very important in terms of just being committed. And, there's timing for everything. Sometimes you just don't have all the pieces in place in life to be totally focused on a business. But if you are ready to start it, then it's like, okay, maybe you have to work on it at 5 a.m. because you have a job sometimes to keep it going and build momentum. Or maybe, on the weekend when people are out having fun, maybe you're going to be in your house working on this for a few hours before you go join them later for drinks. It's making that commitment the way you'd make a commitment to anything that matters to you in your life.
That's right.
But I think it's like the 4-minute mile. A lot of people didn't know that they can get to 1 million in a non-employer business. So I think as these stories have circulated, and a lot of these folks are out there telling their stories independently, the more people realize they can do it too, because we do sometimes have self-limiting beliefs. It's like, oh, it's reasonable to make $200,000 in a one-person business. So they set that as the ceiling. A lot of times the ceiling is what their old salary was, right? Because people think that what the employer valued them at is what their value is. And it's really not, right? I mean, because you're an employer, that like an employer has to deal with things like making payroll. So they can't always pay every person exactly what they're worth, because they have cash flow concerns too. And so they, hope to provide value to the employees in other ways by having great culture or having great perks like working from home or things like that, in lieu of paying them exactly what they're worth. And, in terms of the value that the employees create in your own business, you get to keep your value, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of mind blowing for people, because we're so trained to be employees by the school system and by our employers that people, they don't realize it's totally different as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love more than anything about interviewing people that interview others for a living is just how much wisdom you get from interviewing so many different types of entrepreneurs. And so for the audience listening in today, just based on everything that you have learned from your countless articles and interviews and, what you put into your book, are there any big takeaways that you would like to leave them with, before we finish up today?
Well, absolutely, John. I think the number one thing for people to take away is, if you want to do this, then start, right? Because there are a lot of people that get caught up in perfectionism. That will not help you build a successful business, waiting for the perfect moment. And I think this is also a very big mindset shift. If you've had a corporate job, you wouldn't go into a meeting with a PowerPoint where you hadn't thought through every single angle, right? And bulletproof your idea, because people are going to ask you questions about it. As an entrepreneur, you don't always have the ability to come in with all the information. You don't have as much preparation time, because sometimes you've got to seize market opportunities, or an opportunity comes to you. a client says, can you do this? And you've never done it before. And maybe it would realistically take you a year of preparation, but you're going to have 1 week, but you think you can do it. You have to change your mindset a little bit in order to do what these folks have done and just be open to learning on the fly in real time. It really is a big mindset shift, but when you desensitize yourself to it and say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to get it 100%, but I'm going to do a really good job and I'm going to learn from it and do it better the next time. That gives you the capacity to build your revenue and to build yourself up as an entrepreneur. So I would say, the Nike slogan, just do it. There's a lot to be said for that. Just take the leap. You don't want to take crazy leaps, but a lot of times people lack confidence, even though they might know something inside out. Like maybe they've been working for 10 or 15 years doing this in their job. They still lack confidence, but sometimes you got to push yourself a little bit. And when you do, you'll be surprised at how much you can achieve.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I can't tell you how many people I meet that they're so good at something, but they just work for somebody else. And I'm just like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if you were just to create a course and just get started, there's so many people that would love to know what you know, that you could easily build that into $1 million business. It's just
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I would say, John? I think there are some parallels to fitness with this, right? Some people are just naturally very disciplined, right? They're like, I see them out running early in the morning, through the freezing cold with all their running equipment on, right? They're just disciplined. They get themselves up, they go and do it themselves. Other people hire a personal trainer to kind of kick their butt, right? Make them work out. They both end up fit in the end, right? Because both of them are actually doing it. So part of it is just putting the right support systems in place. That's why I was talking about coaching, because some people maybe don't need a coach. They just naturally will push themselves, and other people just need that push. Or maybe they don't need it initially, but then when they get to a certain size with the business, they're coming in on 1 million, that requires a different mindset that they don't have, and they're not exposed to people that have it. So part of it is knowing yourself, or getting to know yourself and saying, where do I need help or a support system? I just attended a group called the Fast Track program that's funded by the Kauffman Foundation. I've been to 2 of their classes. It's excellent. It trains people to be entrepreneurs. And there's about 10 people in the group. And this group had been meeting for a while. And they were talking about a lot of technical things, like how to set up their business. But what I saw was one of the most powerful benefits of belonging was the community, right? Like having a group that they had to be accountable to give progress reports on their business, and they were doing presentations on their business. They were testing pricing and that sort of thing. You have people to help you battle test things and have that support system. It's tremendously important, and it's either free or a low cost program. There's a lot of things like that in the community, and it almost doesn't matter which one you go to. It's more of the creating a system of accountability for yourself, so you keep on moving forward and don't get caught up in your own head.
I just love that. It's such there's so much wisdom in what you just said that I really hope people listen to that over and over and take that to heart, because and I teach that a lot too when I'm training people. It's just like, the number one person you have to protect yourself from is yourself, because you're emotional.
You're right. Because it's a little lonely and isolating to run a business. Even if you're in a co-working space or whatever, ultimately there are times when you're just alone with that business. So you do have to break out of that, I think, in order to grow as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Elaine, this interview has been absolutely incredible, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to grab your book right away. Really quick, where can they find that book?
The book is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. Pretty much every major bookstore should have it. And they can reach me if they'd like to get in touch. I do write back on the $1,000,000onepersonbusiness.com. That's all spelled out in words, or my name is spelled in the show notes, or at ElainePofeldt.com. Both have a contact box. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. under my full name. And I do love hearing from entrepreneurs and corresponding with them, because I think it makes me into a better journalist when I hear what questions they have, if they feel that there were any gaps and things that I could have addressed. That way I can keep iterating my work and keep getting better. So I hope you will write to me and get in touch, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Absolutely. And I have to brag on you just for a second before we wrap up, because I was doing some research on you yesterday and I was going to your website. And I mean, your blogs are freaking incredible and the headlines are mind blowing. I want to read a few of these to the audience because I think they should really visit your website and really dive into a lot of the content that you publish for free. You know, some of the ones that I was looking at is 6 ways to avoid taxes like a millionaire, or how to manage your career like a millionaire, how one woman overcame a panic disorder to build a $2 million solo business. Like, these are really incredible, catchy titles, but the content inside is even more valuable. And so I just want to thank you for doing that. And I hope everyone that's listening to this visits your website and really just takes a deep dive into all of this valuable content that you've put out.
Well, thank you so much. And those are some of the past articles that I've written. And my most current coverage on the $1 Million One Person Business is on Forbes. And I do some stories for CNBC as well. I just did something about people getting to 1 million using Instagram for CNBC, which was a really fun story. And that's the nice thing about this topic, is it's always evolving.
Right.
And there's always something new to say about it. I never get tired of it, because I keep on, with new technologies, Instagram isn't even new, but Instagram is evolving. All these different platforms are evolving, and there's TikTok and other things. I think we're going to just see more and more growth. And I am hoping that someday I write about $1 billion one-person business. One of the venture capitalists I interviewed for the book predicted that. I'm hoping that his prediction proves to be true.
I believe it. I believe it. Well, Elaine, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we just appreciate having you on the show.
Oh, what a pleasure, John. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that talk with Elaine Pofeldt. And remember, if you are interested in learning more and gaining further insight, look no further than her book, which can be found on Amazon. The name of that book, again, is The $1 Million One Person Business. I really don't see how anyone could forget that. It's such a catchy title. And also, you can connect with her on her website. And her website is ElainePofeldt.com. That is Elaine, Elaine, Pofeldt, Pofeldt.com. And last but not least, if you have not done so, please subscribe to the Mentor Nation podcast and leave us a great review if, of course, you enjoy the show. We don't charge anything for this show, but if you are a fan, your support by liking, following, and sharing the show is the single greatest thing that you can do, and I will forever be grateful. And with that being said, guys, we'll see you next week with another incredible guest. Happy holidays if you're listening to this live, and if you're listening to it some other time of the year, I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks and take care.